Now, just today, November 5, 2024, Throne and Liberty officially announced their explanation and clarification regarding the system behind contribution and how to get loots in world bosses and field bosses. For the longest time, the calculations behind these contributions were very vague, so players were really just scrambling about on the real factors behind looting in world bosses. Now, to clarify, Throne and Liberty officially announced this blog post and we are gonna talk about it. First, they finally clarified what contribution means. Contribution is earned by doing damage against the enemy and healing friendly players in battle while said enemy is active. Contribution from healing is acquired for healing players both in and out of your party when participating in guild level events or field bosses. This is very important because for the longest time, people have thought that only DPS matters. But they clarified that if you're a healer, you can heal friendly players, which may mean healing guild members outside of your party or even alliance players outside of your guild. This is huge because we finally understand what contribution means. But this also means that tank players do not get any contribution at all because most of the tank players are built to withstand damage and not deal damage. And some sword and shield users are not wand users. So this is something concerning or something that is not yet clarified because as far as I have been experiencing in world bosses, a lot of SNS users actually get loot. So really, we will just wait on further clarifications and hopefully they finally clarify even the formulas behind this. Anyhow, let's understand the distribution rules. They said that when an enemy dies, loot is assigned to the player who first earned contribution. That damage in this case to said enemy. If the players in a group, the loot is assigned to the player's party instead. The chances of getting loot from an enemy is equally distributed to a party. But this actually raises a question that maybe it is better to go solo if you really want to get the loot because your contribution will be divided among all your party members if you are in a party, as far as I understand in this blog post. Because in this text, they said that in this case, the drops from the enemy have equal chance of distribution across all party members. And they have clarified that if you have better contribution, you have better chances of looting. If you're in a party, that means that it is possible that even if you have the best contribution, there is still RNG, random distribution to your party members. Now, this is still speculation, so we really do not know because they have not posted any formula behind this, but you can draw out your own conclusion by reading this blog post, which I will link in the description below. Now, let's go to Peace Mode bosses and guild raids. They said that when a Peace Mode field boss dies, all players are sorted by individual player contribution. Players must meet a minimum contribution to be eligible to receive loot from the boss. There are two drop types that come from Peace Mode bosses. First is contribution drops and the second is random drops. Now, they have clarified that a single player is only eligible to receive one of these drops. That means that if you get your contribution drop, you will not be in the pool for the random drop. And if you don't get your contribution drop, you are in the pool for the random drop. Now, this is an even system given that if it will only be based on contribution, most of the whales will just get bigger and bigger and most of the casual players are just gonna get weaker and weaker. So at the very least, we still have random drops for those players who are not the best damage dealers or the best healers. You can argue that one is better than the other, but this is what it is. They have also given us a quick glimpse of their formula because they clarified here that if your contribution was 3% of the total contribution, you would have a 3% chance of acquiring either the sword or the mask. This means that let's say the boss has a total of 100% HP and you did 50% of that damage, theoretically, then that means you have a 50% chance of getting that item. That is huge because that means that the stronger players will really get higher chances of getting the loot drops. But then again, at least we have this failsafe of random drops, given that there are a lot of drops from the boss and a player is only eligible to receive one of these drops. So that ultimately means that you can deal as much damage as possible or heal as much as possible and get to that contribution drop, or take your chances and get to that random drop. They have also clarified that any player who receives epic equipment is unable to attain a second piece of epic equipment from the same boss skill. Now let's go to the more juicy part, the conflict mode bosses. So the conflict mode bosses is the current end game of Throne and Liberty. Before the castle siege, this is where war happens. Now, they said that loot is assigned in a two-stage process. First, loot is assigned to a guild, then the loot is assigned to players within the guild. When a field boss dies during conflict mode, a guild's contribution is calculated as the sum of the individual contribution for each player in the guild who participated in the fight. That means the higher the damage and the healing of a guild, the higher the contribution of that guild, the higher the chances of that guild to get the loot. Loot items are distributed based to a chance according to guild contribution. But Unlike peace mode bosses, dying to an enemy or another player during a conflict mode boss will result in the dying player losing 70% of their individual contribution, meaning it reduces the guild's total contribution at the end of the match. So that ultimately means that in a nutshell, in conflict mode bosses, if an enemy kills you, you lose 70% of your contribution. That means significantly less chances of getting the drop. If you get wiped as a guild or as an alliance in a conflict mode boss, there is a huge chance that the items will go to your enemies. And then they also clarify that once a guild has been assigned an item, all participating players within the guild have equal chance to obtain an item. So what this means is that in conflict mode bosses, although your contributions, your individual contributions matter, it increases only your guild's chances, and when your guild gets ultimately chosen, it will be randomized. Because they have clarified that all participating players within the guild have equal chance to obtain the item. So the acquirer of the said item is random, but the guild contribution, or the higher contribution between the two guilds, or how many guilds that are fighting there, is up to the individual contribution and the sum of it of all its players. So similar to the one above, they have given us a glimpse of their formula. They said that if players A, B, and C had 10, 15, and 20 contribution respectively, and all belong to the same guild, then the guild's total contribution would be 45%. It's simply adding up all the individual contributions of the guild. That means the higher the kills, the higher the damage to the boss, and the higher the healing of all the healers in that guild, the higher their contribution points is, the higher their overall guild contribution is. Then that means ultimately the higher their chances are to get the loot. So in summary, the most important thing that you need to understand here is contribution. They said that contribution is earned by doing damage against the enemy, number 1, and healing friendly players, which includes your party members, allied guild alliances, and your guildmates. The next thing that you need to understand is that there are two pools on where the AI or the algorithm gets your loot. Number 1 is the contribution drops and the random drops. This basically means that if you have highest contribution, healing, and DPS, you get items. So in a nutshell, the rules of the conflict mode is just basically do as much damage as possible and heal as much as possible, but don't get killed. If you get killed, you lose 70% of your individual contribution, which then hurts the total contribution of your guild. You must also understand that when your guild ultimately gets the items, the item acquirer is random, because all the players that contributed to that boss will have an equal chance to receive the loot. If you have been following closely, we have a huge problem, and that is, what do tanks get? Contribution, as they clarified, is only calculated by doing damage or healing friendly players. Most of the tanks are built to withstand damage, not deal damage, and also barely heal at all. So that means that if you are a tank, you really do not know how to contribute. I hope that they clarify this, or I hope that this is already in their system, but they have failed to mention it, because as far as I understand and as far as my experience goes, a lot of our tank players in our guild actually get the loot. At the end of the day, it is all RNG, and we have a lot of experiences found in Reddit and even in my own server, wherein a random player just gets the best field boss loot, and some other players in some other servers even get Archboss loots without guilds. So if you want to really get the loot, you need to participate in all these field bosses and archbosses events. If you don't want to take your chances, then you can read a lot more, as I will post this blog in the description, and you can speculate and you can discuss it with your guild. My own personal experience and opinion, this is the best content of Throne and Liberty so far before Castle Siege, so I'm really hoping that they're gonna be able to fix this and pan this out as balanced as possible and as fun as possible. I'm hoping that the devs will understand all the concerns, and I think that the recent updates of the selection chest and this clarification are steps in the right direction. And that's pretty much it. Again, these are all speculations and based on my understanding of this blog post. You can check it out for yourself and understand it for yourself, and hopefully within the coming days we will be able to test it more and understand it more, so we can optimize our strategies in order to get the best in slot world bosses items. If you're still watching, thank you so much for supporting me. Again, I'm a fairly new channel and I have been getting good feedback so far in my first 2 videos, and I'm really happy, and I will continue on making these videos and getting better at making them. If you have any suggestions or questions on what topic should we discuss next about Throne and Liberty, or anything at all, do not hesitate to comment down below, and I'll be sure to check every one of them. Again, thank you so much, and I hope you have a good day. Peace.